Hello everybody and welcome back to Teachers Talk Money, where I help teachers master their money in order to give back to themselves. Today's video is all about how the car that you drive can change your financial future forever. So as you know by now, I'm unfrugal, and I'll link a video below talking about what that means. But essentially, I love to spend money on things that are important to me, and I like to not spend money on things that really aren't that important in my life. Another piece of this is that I really don't like scrutinizing each and every small discretionary purchase, and I hate financial advice that tells people to do that. But I do believe that there are really big ways where we can actually move the needle and save a lot of money, and transportation is one of the biggest ones. Transportation is a huge chunk of most people's budget. For example, the average car payment according to Credit Karma for a new car is $568 a month, and that's over 71 months, and $397 a month for a used car, and both of these averages are for over 5 years of payments. So this is an absolutely ridiculous amount of money. Now, that doesn't mean it's always a bad idea to spend that much or even more on your transportation. I love spending a lot of money on a lot of different line items, including some big ticket items. My rent to me is a very big ticket line item, and it's very expensive to me. So I'm not a fan of cutting all costs, but when it comes to the car that I'm driving, I really don't see it as anything more than a way for me to get from point A to point B. Now, that isn't everybody, and some people really value having a really nice car or a particular type of car, and I'm not here to shame anyone who is making that decision and can afford it and has a plan for their financial future. I actually have a friend who is very money savvy and has over a $500 car payment. So if that is worthwhile to you, I am not here to shame you in any way, shape, or form. However, what I am here to do is kind of get people to question whether or not these hundreds of dollars a month are really worth it to them when it comes to the opportunity costs of what they could be using that money on instead. So first, let's talk about some of the ways to avoid a car payment of this size. Number one is to save a large down payment up front. So I have a savings account, aka a sinking fund, for car repairs and replacement, and I fund this to about $6,000, and then I have money there for when repairs come up, and I have a large down payment for my next car ready. Let's take a look at an example of how this could affect the payments that you're making over time and how much money you're spending in total over time. So for these examples, I am using a car payment calculator that I'll link down below. I think it's just carpaymentcalculator.net is the URL. And we're looking at examples for a used car. My next tip to avoid a hefty car payment will be to buy used, but we'll get to that in a minute. So say the vehicle price is $15,000 and you already have that $5,000 down payment. We're doing an interest rate of 6%, which seemed to be the average across different sources I looked at, and we're just doing a 60-month loan term. As you can see, having this hefty down payment of just $5,000 makes your payment $210 and means that you're only spending about $1,743 in interest over the life of the loan, should you use the entire life of the loan and not pay it off earlier. So if you would have spent the average monthly payment of $400 on this used car, you are now saving about $190 a month, which equals $2,280 a year and $11,400 over the life of the loan, which is a really huge amount of money. Now, if you buy less car, which is also an important consideration, that down payment goes down even further. So let's take a look at another example with a $10,000 car and the same down payment in all of the same terms. This would make your monthly payment $108 and mean that you're only spending about $900 in interest. So all that money you would have been saving in the example before is now completely increased by just buying a cheaper car. My next point is that you should try to buy used. So if we're just looking at moving that average down payment from the average $568 for a new car to the $397 of a used car, that alone could make a huge difference in your financial future. A lot of personal finance creators talk about how new cars depreciate as soon as you drive them off the lot, and that can be true. I mean, you can still get a very good chunk of money if you want to sell that car back, depending on a lot of factors like how long you've driven it and all that stuff. But I am actually more interested not in seeing cars as an asset because they're just very finicky. I don't really like to think of them that way. I'm actually more interested in the opportunity cost of buying a used car versus a new car because it's cheaper. So if you were to invest the $171 saved from the average new car payment to the average used car payment, this could make a huge difference in your financial future with just that one change. My number 3 tip to making sure you're not spending as much on a car is to negotiate. Now, in full transparency, I am not a very confident negotiator when it comes to cars because I know very little about cars. I often feel as though I'll be taken advantage of because I'm a woman. And so I don't feel qualified personally in my point of growth that I'm at with car negotiating to give a lot of advice. I will say that one piece of advice I received that really helped me was understanding that negotiating for a car is really about working together with the person you're negotiating with and finding a compromise rather than sort of having this adversarial relationship. Now, this only works if you are talking to a respectful salesperson that treats you well and isn't trying to be shady, and that's not always the case. So if you don't feel like you are getting that respect from the person you're talking to, you should probably walk away and find another dealer to work with. Used car dealers get a lot of bad press, and there are certainly some shady ones, but I will say that there are some really awesome ones as well. So don't necessarily write off everybody, just make sure that you feel you're being treated well and your questions are being answered in that negotiation process. That's the only tip I will give, and I will link some helpful resources down below. Number 4, of course, is to improve your credit score, which again, this takes a lot of time. And yeah, I personally detest the credit system for a lot of different reasons, but it is important to know that if you have a better credit score, you'll probably be paying less in interest. So take a look at my video below on how to improve your credit score if you're interested in learning more about that. And then tip number 5 is actually to consider not buying a car. Now, obviously, again, this is not for everybody. Many of us need to have a car to get to work, but some people might actually be able to go without a car for some time and rely on public transportation, or if you have a household with multiple cars, perhaps you could become a 1-car household or just eliminate one of those cars. Just something to consider, because even if you follow all of the tips above, buying and maintaining a car is always going to be extremely expensive. So if you have the ability to entirely opt out of it, I would. Frankly, I wish that I did have that ability. The reason that these car purchases can move the needle so much is because cars are so expensive. So you really want to make sure that you're not justifying spending a lot more money in cars than you really need to be. So instead of looking at hypotheticals, let's actually take my personal car history as an example of how cars can totally change your financial future based on which cars you choose to drive. Now, I have never driven a nice car by any measure, but I have had some privileges with my car history. So let's just get into all of that and make sure it's clear how some of these privileges did intersect with good financial choices in order to change my financial future for the better. Biggest privilege that I have with car buying, and probably one of the biggest financial privileges I've had in this life, is that I got my first car for free. It was a hand-me-down from my brother. Essentially, when I finished college at the age of 21, I was able to get my brother's 2000 Toyota Camry, which was 18 years old at the time, and drive that for the first 3 years of my career. This car, I believe with everything included, cost about $3,000. And so this was a $3,000 financial benefit to me, basically. Not having a car payment was a huge factor in how quickly I was able to pay off my student loans and how quickly I was able to start investing. Again, I was very fortunate to not have to pay that $3,000. But even if I had purchased that car at that price, I still would have saved over $11,000 over the course of the 3 years that I drove it. So I just don't want anyone to write this off and say, well, of course that saved you money, you got it for free. Even if I had purchased it myself with my own money, I still would have saved $11,000. And that money early on in your career and that far from retirement is a huge difference because of the way compound interest works when you're investing that money instead of using it on a vehicle. Then my younger brother graduated high school 3 years later, and it was time for me to pay it forward and to give him his first car for free. So I gave him the 2000 Camry, and it was time for me to purchase my next car. Now, I got very unlucky with this because I had to purchase a used car during the worst time in history to purchase a used car. However, I was still happy to do it because my brother needed a car and I had a lot of the money I needed set aside. I will link a Planet Money episode below that explains why buying a used car at this time, which was just after the pandemic, was a really, really bad time for a person buying a car. So I decided to purchase a 2005 Toyota Camry, so I got one that was 5 years newer. Also had half of the mileage of my 2000 Camry, so that was pretty sweet. And all things included, this cost $7,000. I had only saved up $5,000, so this is where another bit of financial privilege kicked in. My brother offered to pay the remaining $2,000 up front as a loan and allow me to pay him back interest-free. Now, I paid him back in 2 months, so the interest on that would have really been negligible anyway, but being able to just have that money readily available was absolutely a huge privilege. So by having most of the money for that car saved and buying a cheap car, I was able to save more than $16,000 more than the average used car buyer over the course of 5 years, which is about the average length of loan for a used car buyer. So taking both cars into account, I was able to save more than $27,000 in these first couple years teaching, and that's over the course of 8 years. So the 3 years that I drove the 2000 Camry and the 5 years that I'm going to drive this car without having a payment. Not to mention how much longer I will drive it after that point if I can. And I am investing a lot of the money I would have otherwise spent on these things, so this isn't just like some hypothetical opportunity cost. This is a very real difference in my financial future. Even if I only invested $17,000 of the $27,000 that I'm saving by driving cheap used cars, that money alone would grow to be over $69,000 at a 7% rate of return, taking inflation into account by retirement. And I'll put up a graph that shows how I got those numbers. My plans going forward is to drive my 2005 Camry for as long as I possibly can, drive it into the ground, as they say, and then buy another older used car, and so on and so forth. Making these really big money moves is something that helps me save a lot of money without having to worry about the more smaller day-to-day purchases that tend to, I think, bring the most guilt for people. So I hope that this shows you how really considering the price of really big purchases very much matters in your finances, more than stressing over the small stuff. Again, if you love cars, more power to you. Just make sure that you are running all the numbers, that you can afford the cars you're buying, and that they're truly worthwhile to you, because you are, with any decision you make, weighing one option against the opportunity cost of every other option. And if you're paying a lot of money in cars and you don't really care about your car, maybe that's something you should be reconsidering. If this video resonated with you, or if you have any questions or any challenges to the things I said, please type me a comment down below. I would love to hear from you. Have an amazing week, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!